You're watching JayzTwoCents. As a PC builder of nearly 25 years, there's one thing I can promise you about the term bottlenecking. It is overused and misunderstood. In order to understand why I say the term bottlenecking is overused and misunderstood, you first have to understand exactly what bottlenecking is. But first, let's go ahead and talk about some of the questions I get asked every single day regarding bottlenecking. Hey Jay, I want to get a GTX 660 Ti, but I only have an AMD 4100. Am I going to bottleneck my GPU? The term bottlenecking realistically is just like it sounds. You take something big and you're shoving it through something small. Generally, bottlenecking is used in terms of the graphics card being slowed down by the processing speed or power of your CPU. There are tons and tons of hardware configurations and combos out in the market. There's literally endless combination of different parts that you can use. But what we're going to do today is we are going to take my GTX 680 and my Core i7 3770K, and we are going to recreate some bottlenecking scenarios, and you are going to learn exactly what it is that happens when you bottleneck. Okay, enough of the stupid announcer guy, whatever talking dude I was doing. I really want to make a point here, people. People are terrified of building a computer because I'm learning that not only are they afraid to break it, but they're afraid to get the wrong parts because they're so terrified of this term bottlenecking. And that's a term that most of the time is definitely missed. Most of the time, 80% of the time, it works every time. Bottlenecking, if you see that term being used, generally it's by somebody who has absolutely no fucking clue what they're doing when it comes to computers, and you might as well just run for the hills or get advice from somebody else. People who truly know how to build computers tend to not use the term bottlenecking. Instead of bottlenecking, why don't we go ahead and use the analogy or the term of non-optimized hardware? Because basically, what bottlenecking is a situation where you take your graphics card and it has to slow down because your CPU says, whoa, just simmer down a little bit. I can't keep up with what it is you're trying to do. And a bottleneck is when your GPU no longer runs at 100% utilization simply because the CPU is sending a signal to the GPU saying, I can't handle all this mess. I got bronchitis. Ain't nobody got time for that. Everybody's computer is going to perform differently. Every game is going to run different on every single machine because of different things that are running on your machine. Memory allocation, your operating system, the amount of programs you have running. Just because you're not getting the same results as somebody else does not mean that you have a bottleneck. We're going to take my system back here. We're going to set up a couple of cameras, and I'm going to do the ghetto method of filming my screen rather than using a capture device because we don't want to have the capture device slow down any of the speeds that are going to be represented in this bottlenecking recreation scenario. We're going to take this PC, we're going to disable cores, we're going to disable hyperthreading, we're going to slow it down, and we're going to find out exactly what point do we truly create a bottleneck. Okay, everybody, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and load up Valley Benchmark. It's just going to test the GPU only. No PhysX, no CPU processing, any of that shit. We're not adding any additional stuff. We are just going to see exactly what the raw CPU rendering of the GPU's informational inputs it can do. So this is going to take out, this is all GPU based right here. So if there's anything slowing down the GPU, the only thing it could possibly be is the CPU. You can't blame PhysX or any of that. So we're going to go ahead and start up this benchmark, and then we're going to do this here in one clean take, no cuts. That way you can see we didn't change anything over there. Obviously, I guess it wouldn't really matter because we are doing our base test. So let's go ahead and load up the benchmark. And as you can see, this is all still one take here. So we'll go ahead and fast forward this thing, do some magic special effects stuff, and fast forward it and let us see what happens. Okay, so there it is, guys, right there. We benchmarked a average frames per second of 44.9, baseline score of 1877, minimum score of 26.9, maximum score, minimum FPS of 26.9, maximum FPS of 63.9. So there is our baseline, and that's what we are going to use now for the rest of these tests to see exactly what changes. All right, we are back, and we just reloaded from the BIOS, and basically we took my i7 3770K and we turned it into an i5 3570K by slowing the cores down to 3.8 gigahertz to match a stock i5 3570K's turbo speed, and we disabled hyperthreading altogether, because that's essentially all an i7 and an i5 is compared to each other, is hyperthreading and no hyperthreading. So let's go ahead and see now if we're going to bottleneck this GTX 680 at all on the GPU score, or the Valley benchmark here for the GPU, and let's see if anything changed by turning off that hyperthreading. Okay guys, so there you have it. By turning my overclocked i7 into a standard clocked i5, we've got virtually the same results. We lost, it looks like, a couple of frames per second on the minimum. I'll have to go back and check the maximum, but the score is almost identical. And as you can see right there, the GPU managed to stay at 100% most of the time. The reason why it dips down is when it's changing between scenes, but there you go. At the i5 speeds, exactly the same. Now, you must be asking yourself, okay, well then what does it take to actually slow down this test? Well, we're gonna go ahead and take things to a little bit of an extreme. Okay guys, and for this next test, we've basically turned my i7 3770K that normally runs at 4.8 gigahertz into an i5 3217U, which is a 1.8 gigahertz dual core with hyperthreading. As you can see right here in CPU-Z, we are running at 1.8 gigahertz, 2 cores, 4 threads. And there are the 4 threads right over there. As you can see, core 0 and core 1 active only. So let's go ahead and start up our benchmark and see just what happens with the performance. Something tells me we're not going to see anything too drastically different here. And if that's the case, then we're just going to go ahead and have to move on to the next test. Okay guys, so there we go. There definitely was a dip in performance. We went from an average down to 38.2, a score of 1600, a minimum frames per second dropped from, I think, 23-ish, 22-ish frames per second down to 14. But look at our max frames per second. Didn't really change much. So what does that mean? That means there's something in this test. There's something graphically that happened in this test at some point that made the minimum FPS drop down to 14.7 because the CPU couldn't handle that much data that came at it. Now who knows what point during the test that was? It could have been the light bloom, it could be these clouds, it could be just about anything. But as I'm sitting here watching this, it's running at 40 frames per second here on an Ultra HD benchmark. I mean, the benchmark on this is on Ultra HD. It's everything turned on, 1080p, light bloom, motion, all that crap is going. And we just did it right now tricking the computer into thinking that we're running on basically an i3, a dual core with hyperthreading. Now I can hear the haters already. I can hear you guys. I can hear you through the video that's technically not even done yet, saying, flawed test, that's a flawed test, and I'll tell you why. Because you ran a synthetic benchmark, and because of that, the computer already knew it was coming, and therefore it didn't have to actually process any raw data that's being thrown at it from, say, Battlefield 3 64-player server, because the data is constantly changing and stuff, so it has lots of processing it has to do on top of what the graphics card's doing. See, the graphics card, you knew it was coming because it was a synthetic benchmark, and so there really wasn't much of a test being thrown at it to the CPU, so it's flawed. Yeah, that's pretty much what I hear you all you nerds out there saying. Yeah, I know what's happening here. I know it's happening here because apparently Arnold does gaming and stuff like that. But okay, so if that's what you guys want to test next, let's go ahead and do it. And just like we did last time, we've got to go ahead and do our baseline test. So I'm going to go ahead and throw my overclocking setup back on this so that we can see exactly where Battlefield 3 on 64-player maps starts to bottleneck.
So now that we're in the game, we're going to go ahead and turn on the draw FPS command so that we can see how many frames per second we're getting in here. As we can see in this map, I'm getting about 80 in the map, or in the menu system, I should say. So let's go and get in here in the game and see what we got. See if I can't kill some noobs here. So we just spiked over 100 frames per second there for a second. I just showed that noob who's boss, and I'm dead! I mean, 162 frames per second right there. Good lord. Ah, didn't see that guy sitting there. 166 frames per second. Wow. Okay, well, and you guys are wondering why I don't have a GTX 780 yet? Okay. Why? Look at this. 200 frames per second. Pointing at the wall. 200 frames per second. Yeah, I mean, a little bit of a different conversation here, but you tell me why I need a GTX 780. Especially you guys who are talking shit about me having a 680. I thought JayzTwoCents would have had a better GPU. God, don't get me started on a rant about those of you guys who know nothing about hardware whatsoever, trying to give me a hard time about what I use. Don't even go there, sister. Don't even go there. It's 160 frames per second. Come on. Boom. You're dead. What? There's a hit marker on him with rockets. Let's kill these guys, and then we can get out of here. Oh, I saw him there. Ow, I'm dead. Okay, so as you can see, well over 100 frames per second. I mean, 150s at times. And this is a 64-man map, as you can see. Oh, I just got revived. I revived into looking into his butthole. That was kind of crappy. He's dead. Ah, I'm dead. Okay, so, there you go. i7 right there, 130s, 160s, 64-player map, explosion.
Okay, so that was with all settings on Ultra. We were sitting up in the 100s in the menu. I'm getting 162 frames per second. Epic menu frames, so, yeah. Anyway, let's go ahead and turn this thing into an i5 and see what happens. Okay, guys, we are back, and now we have turned, once again, my i7 into an i5. You can see it right there. Running 4 cores, 4 threads. Turbo speed right now, it's slowed down, but it is maxed out at, there it is, 3.8 gigahertz. It's not showing anything because it's not running any load. But anyway, we're at stock speeds. Take my word for it, 3.8 gigahertz is where we are, and there are the 4 cores showing over there with 4 threads only. So let's go ahead and load up some more Battlefield here, and let's see what happens when you turn an i7 into an i5, and let's see if you get some of that there bottlenecking, as everybody likes to say. Bottlenecking sounds like a dirty makeout term. Hey baby, do you want a bottleneck? Nah. Okay, the game has loaded, so once again, let's go ahead and turn on our, why did it go, why on earth? Alright, get out of windowed mode, please. There we go. Let's go ahead and turn on our draw FPS. Draw FPS. There we go. FPS is turned on. As you can see in the menu, we're sitting at 70 frames per second. This is a different map, but it shouldn't really make too much of a difference here. The important thing to note is let's take a look at CPU usage. As you can see right there, it is running at the 3.8 gigahertz, as I mentioned, 4 cores, 4 threads. And we are sitting at about 75% CPU usage. So we will come back and revisit that as we're playing the game and see what happens to that number. So let's go ahead and get the game going. You can see the frames per second right there in the corner, so keep your eye on that as we do our thing here. Once again, as I mentioned, 64 players in this bad boy, and let's go see what happens here. Let's go kill some noobs.
Whoa. I died. That was poopy. No way! I killed him. I so killed him. Let's try this again. Frames per second, though, are looking pretty good. We're sitting in the 80s. Sometimes popping up into the 90s, like right there. We're in the hundreds. I killed a guy. Looking at a wall, I'm sitting at 110. There we go. Look at this guy camping. Throw a grenade out there, make an explosion. Ooh, look at that. Pretty pro.
So yeah, frames per second, as you can see, dropped down a little bit. Not a lot. A couple frames per second, but I mean, that could be a little bit of variance there in the map. But for the most part, you don't want your frames per second to be greater than the refresh rate of your monitor anyway. That's going to create screen tearing, which in my opinion is worse than this whole bottlenecking concept. But let's go ahead and start to see. Let's look now at slowing this down and see where we start to truly create a bottleneck. Because as I bring up the second camera here and show you the history on the GPU here while we were playing, look at that. It was still pegged at 100% the entire time. So those little dips there where you see it go down, that's basically where I died. And when it goes into the menu, it's not really rendering much. So bottlenecking is going to be when this GPU usage is no longer being fully utilized, where the GPU says, I have to slow down because the CPU can't keep up. So let's find where that mark starts to happen, shall we? Okay, Tech Addicts, we're back, and we've got this i7 turned into an i3 3220 CPU. I went ahead and went with the 3220 on this game test instead of the 3217U because that's a mobile processor. This here is now more commonly what you find people asking, 3220 or, low-end i5. And as you can see, we've got 2 cores, 4 threads running at, it says 1.6, but it is 3.3 turbo boost. And there you go, there's your 4 threads. And core 1, or core 0 and core 1, proving it is a dual core now.
Okay, so the game is loaded up. Let's go ahead and do our, draw FPS on here. And as you can see in the menu, we're now getting 46 to 60 frames per second-ish. Let's go ahead and deploy. And as you can see, our frames per second have dropped down a little bit here into the 30s and 40s, it looks like, especially with all these explosions. It's not entirely choppy, but it does start to feel a little bit jittery. I mean, clearly, it does feel like there's something being held back here. But it's sitting in the 60s. I mean, right there, we went up to 100 frames per second again. Whoa. I'm dead. Seems to be the story of my life in this game. Die, everybody! Die! I got a double kill, though, with my 93R. It's a pistol. It's a pistol. Now, taking a look at the frames per second here, you can see they clearly are playable. I mean, we're sitting between the 70s, 50s. We do get some low spikes into the 30s, which is definitely a little bit less than desirable. But it's still very playable.
Okay guys, so I've loaded up another 64-player map right here, as you can see, as I'm getting shot and I'm dying. But this is what bottlenecking looks like in terms of specs, guys. Do you see how the CPU usage right there in those green bars is completely pegged out? It's sitting at 94.4 frames, or 94% utilized. And do you see how the GPU is just sitting there bouncing up and down going, okay, whenever you're ready, let's go and hop into the game here, and you're going to see once again, this GPU usage is going to drop down slightly, especially as I start moving around, which is a lot difficult. This is hard to do with one hand. But look at that. GPU usage, how did I not die? Okay. Well, anyway, GPU usage is sitting there in the 50s, CPU usage is sitting there in the 90s. Guys, that's a bottleneck. Now let's go ahead and talk about what we've learned in this video. There you go, guys. Bottlenecking is best as JayzTwoCents can bring it to you in a real-world scenario where you can see exactly what bottlenecking is and what bottlenecking isn't. So guys, here you go. I hope you take this information. I hope you use it. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you know somebody who's just horribly misusing the term bottlenecking, please show them this video and share this video with anyone that you think it may help when it comes to building their PC. And together we can educate people on the proper terminology of building your own PC and when it comes to bottlenecking. Remember guys, it's hardware misoptimization, or whatever it was I said in the beginning. Poor hardware optimization. There you go, guys. I'll see you next time. It's been JayzTwoCents.